Thank you for the introduction, Mr. Fiddler. Great to see you all. I'm honored to be here. I want to acknowledge that we are gathered on the unceded Anishinaabe, Algonquin territories. And for me, every time I do that, I think it's an important time for settlers just to acknowledge that we're on lands where the first people have been faced with historic and ongoing injustice. And for me, it's a reminder for me to commit myself to fight towards fixing that, fighting for justice, to remedy the injustice. I want to acknowledge a lot of important people in the audience today. Of course, the elders. I want to acknowledge all the knowledge keepers, the elders. In my tradition, and I know in the Indigenous tradition, it is so important to hold up and to value and to respect our elders. So thank you. The youth, as we acknowledge the elders, we're going to acknowledge the next generation. So we think about the future leaders, the ones that are going to take our place. And I want to acknowledge youth that are here. I saw a number of groups speaking and meeting, so it's good to see active youth. And the veterans, I met some earlier today, the veterans who served. And served maybe in cases where they faced discrimination and injustice, but still served the country. I want to acknowledge you and thank you for your service. And the chiefs, you got a tough job, I know, and it's an important job, so I want to thank all the chiefs. And finally, I want to thank National Chief Cindy Woodhouse Nipinak. It is a very, very heavy burden to carry as National Chief. Lots of important work gets done, lots of important negotiations. And I just want to thank you for all the great work you do. It's a tough job and you're rising to the occasion. C'est vraiment un honneur d'être parmi vous aujourd'hui. Je suis tellement honoré et j'ai hâte de recevoir vos questions. I'm actually really looking forward to your questions, so I'm going to give you some thoughts and then I look forward to hearing what you have to say and hopefully responding to any questions you have. But I have been spending a lot of time meeting with nations, meeting with leaders, and meeting with communities, and I've been hearing from you really clearly a number of things. One is that you are describing the reality that you are denied basic human rights, and it is wrong, and I hear you on that. You've described to me, and I've met with you in your communities and seen the overcrowded and dilapidated homes that are not acceptable. I agree with you on that. Clean drinking water remains an issue in many communities. The massive infrastructure gap, this one comes up again and again. The gap is huge. We got to close it. And this I'll take some more time to talk about afterwards or later on in my speech, but the specific, ongoing, painful reality of systemic discrimination when it comes to Indigenous people and policing and Indigenous people being killed by police is something that is very heartbreaking. It is wrong and it has to be addressed. A government that shirks its fiduciary duties. There are clear fiduciary duties that need to be met and the government's ignoring and shirking that responsibility. And there is still an ongoing genocide that targets Indigenous women and girls. And that is something that is so wrong, so heartbreaking. And then I've heard many stories from your communities about this impact and how it has to end. I would say after 9 years in government, it is becoming more and more clear, I feel. Folks are sharing this with me that they feel that Justin Trudeau is letting them down, that there was high hopes and a lot of promises, but that has not been realized, that's not been fulfilled. He says a lot of the right things, but it's not delivering on those things. And I can tell you the government seems more interested in taking action for big corporations than taking action for Indigenous people, and it shows the priorities. Elle avait promis du réel changement, mais elle continue de décevoir. Elle avait promis d'investir dans des refuges pour les femmes et les filles autochtones, par exemple, mais il n'a construit aucun refuge. So I understand people who are really frustrated by this. I'm frustrated too. I'm in there fighting and trying to get stuff done, and it's frustrating when you have to fight and push a government that doesn't get the urgency of how the needs are needing to be met, and you got to get things done, and they're just dragging their feet, delaying, and not showing that urgency. I also want to point out to you, we're coming up to an election, I think it's important to point out, when it comes to Indigenous sovereignty and respect for indigeneity, I think it's clear we all know where Pierre Poilievre stands. If not, I'm going to point out some things. He has promised so-called economic reconciliation, but he votes against harmonizing our laws with the United Nations Declaration. So that means he doesn't want you to have free and prior informed consent, have authority, the right to decide over your own resources, your own lands. There cannot be economic reconciliation if the people of the land don't have power over decisions on their land. And so I think that is a fundamental issue. What I know is, from knowing him and seeing his work, he will always side with the billionaires. That's who he's in it for. And if the billionaires' interest is not aligned with Indigenous communities' interests, he's going to side with the billionaires. For him, he wants to cut. He's been very clear he wants to cut. So that's going to mean cutting Indigenous healthcare, which is already plagued with problems. We know that NHIB needs so many changes. Imagine cutting that. It's going to make it even worse. He wants to cut Indigenous services, services that are already pretty inadequate in a lot of cases. Cutting them would just make it worse. He talks a lot about freedom, but he doesn't want freedom for you. What he wants is freedom for himself. He wants freedom to ignore your treaty rights. He wants a freedom to ignore your rights. He wants freedom to ignore the obligations of the Crown. He wants freedom to ignore free, prior, informed consent. And this is who he really is. You can't say that this is a mistake or, he slipped up his words. He said, literally, in the most heartless way, in the most callous way, that residential school survivors need, quote, stronger work ethic, not compensation. Who says that? These are people that have survived atrocities, the trauma, the real pain, and he says that those people just need to work harder. What a shameful thing to say. You can apologize for that, but it just shows you who you are, if that's what you can even say. He said that chiefs like you, quote, have too much power. This is again who he is. He's taking shots at the chiefs, taking shots at people dealing with trauma. He's a guy that goes to the Frontier Center to give a big speech to his friends. Keep in mind, the Frontier Center is an anti-Indigenous organization that denies the truth of residential schools. Il ne fera jamais ce qu'il faut pour que justice soit rendue aux populations autochtones. Il attaquera vos droits. Il réduira votre financement. For us New Democrats, we know that reconciliation is not compartmentalized. You got to do it in all aspects. For us, it means we got to respect free, prior, informed consent. It means making decisions, you making decisions about your own land and your own resources. I would say that upholding treaty rights and modern treaties, your right to housing, clean drinking water, and all your human rights that have been violated for so long is not only the right thing to do, the morally right thing to do, it is good for the interest of the country moving forward. I believe that lifting up Indigenous law as affirmed by the United Nations Declaration is the true path that we need to walk on. As you know, we've got a really strong team of Indigenous advocates and Indigenous MPs. NDP MP Leader Gazan tabled Bill C-413, which would make residential school denialism an offense under the criminal code, as it should be, because we know it's racist to deny the reality of residential school trauma. She also worked with you to ensure a Red Dress Alert pilot project is launched to help stop the genocide of Indigenous women and girls. We want to see that Red Dress Alert spread across the country so that we value and respect the lives, the sacred lives of Indigenous women and girls. NDP MP Nikki Ashton, who's another strong ally, is fighting to close the infrastructure gap, and she's been working to protect Indigenous languages. He's also leading our efforts to lift up leadership of the Shamattawa First Nations and the Atiasquiac Cree Nation as they fight for clean drinking water. And I know you've seen some of the work of NDP MP Lori Idlout, very proud Inuk woman, who is fighting hard to fix some of the deeply flawed legislation that the Liberals are putting forward, particularly on the First Nations clean drinking water. She worked really hard to make sure that bill had some changes done to it to improve it. We also know NDP MP Blake Desjardins, who's Métis and Cree, who's fighting for safe and affordable housing on reserve and adapting to climate change, and real funding to finish the all-weather roads that many of your communities have fought for. And I've heard, actually, should have mentioned that in the things that I've heard from you. The all-weather roads are so important because the winter roads are getting less and less viable, and they're only open for shorter and shorter periods of time. And Lori forced a House of Commons emergency debate on policing Indigenous peoples, because this is a crisis. And this is what I said I was going to talk about a bit more. For decades, I know your communities have felt the pain of policing that is discriminatory, that targets Indigenous people, that doesn't actually respect and value their lives. And now we are seeing more and more examples of violence being perpetrated by police against Indigenous people. I want to honor the victims and their families and lift up the voices of your leaders. That's why I'm joining you in your call for a national inquiry into systemic racism in policing. I want to acknowledge your leadership, the leadership of your national chief and all the chiefs here, saying that this is getting to a crisis point now. Too many lives, so many lives have been lost, and we need to get to the bottom of this. We need to clearly understand that there's something going on in systemic racism when it comes to policing and Indigenous people. In September, when Lori Idlout secured the emergency debate on this topic, 6 First Nations people have been killed in just 11 days. 6 people in 11 days. And since then, sadly, the number's only grown. So we need to make sure we address this. The current police system is stopping you from building the future that you deserve. It's stopping the youth from feeling safe. And so we believe that the Crown has a responsibility to address this. Furthermore, we believe the Crown has a financial responsibility under treaties that they're not living up to. We are committed to providing your communities with the resources that you are owed and deserve. First Nations-led police services, mental health supports, better training and resources to ensure that you are safe in your own communities. And we're going to fight to make sure that there's Indigenous-led crisis team response, because in a crisis, we need Indigenous leaders there on the ground so that we can protect and save lives. Anytime you send a New Democrat to Ottawa, this is what you get. Someone who's going to fight for you, stand up for you, who cares deeply about you. I'll just wrap up maybe with a couple points about what I really, truly believe and want to see happen. One of the things my mom taught me, one of my early teachings, a big part of our tradition, is this belief that we're all one. And I remember when I was a kid, it was something very hard for me to understand. She would say that we're all one. And I said, well, we look different, we come from different places, we speak different languages, how are we one? At the heart of it, that energy that we have, that which connects us, is much more powerful. Our commonality is much more powerful than our differences. Celebrate those differences, but we are one. And so we would do something in my tradition which is called seva, where you give back to the community, you serve the community. And so sometimes it would mean serving food to elders or to people in the community. And so when we were doing that work, she said, don't think you're serving just an elder or even someone that you don't know. Imagine the person you're serving is your own mother, is your own sister, is your father, is your brother. Imagine that it is you. You're serving yourself. If someone around you is hungry, you're also hungry. And if you care for the people around you, you're caring for yourself. That is a fundamental belief I have, and it's why I really want to lift up the people around me, why I want to fight for justice, because I believe we're all one. I want a Canada where we all rise together, a country where we've got more time for joy and less worry, where we have more hope and less fear, where we have more justice and compassion, less greed. I want to work with you in a true nation-to-nation relationship to ensure all communities have safe housing and infrastructure, clean water, Indigenous policing, access to Indigenous health care, including improving the non-insured health benefit, high-speed broadband, which is so fundamental now. I want to put an end to the genocide that's going on against Indigenous women. I want to make sure that all the TRC calls to action and the MMIWG calls to justice are implemented. The Special Interlocutor for Unmarked Graves' final report and recommendation needs to be implemented, not sit on a shelf collecting dust. Kimberly Murray took on the important work of collecting stories from Indigenous people, and we must, all of us, hear their voices. I want to make sure your inherent treaty and First Nations rights are upheld. I want to make sure the federal government provides adequate supports for First Nations so that people can live prosperous lives, so that people have hope, so that the economies of Indigenous nations and the Canadian economy can thrive together, providing for people. True nation-to-nation relationships isn't just the morally sound thing to do. It's actually the only way that business gets done. Good business gets done when we're partners, not when Ottawa imposes. Those are court challenges, those are fights. It's actually not good. It's not the right thing to do morally, but it's also bad for business. It's a bad way to move forward. I believe we can rebuild First Nations capacity and support Indigenous-led institutions so we can walk together. To amplify your strengths and ensure your knowledge is a part of the decisions that impact your own lives. No more empty promises. In the next election, I want to put to you, you got a choice. I recognize that the Liberals have let you down, and I hear people say the Liberals probably won't get another chance. But I will not stand by and Pierre Poilievre and Conservatives take your power and cut the services that you need and deny your truth. I'm not going to stand by for that. I'm going to fight back. I just want you to know that please count on me as an ally. I want to stand with you. I want to fight on your side to support you. I want to amplify your voice. And if you ever need my help, if you ever need my team, please reach out. We'll be there for you. Thank you so much. Merci. Miigwech.
Miigwech, Jagmeet Singh, leader of the NDP for the New Democratic Party of Canada. We had about 2 minutes left. We were going to open it up for questions. So if there is one question, we might be able to take it. Otherwise, we'll go to the next speaker. Just to let you know, chiefs and proxy representatives, we are hopeful that the Prime Minister will be here for 10 o'clock, as well as federal cabinet ministers. And I know that you will have questions for the Prime Minister if he's here. So we'd like to make sure that we wrap up and get to the next speaker, and then we can get to the Prime Minister and cabinet ministers. So again, we had 2 minutes left. I see 4 speakers, but my understanding is that we will have questions for the Prime Minister, so we'd like to move on fairly quickly. So if I can make it quick, we'll take 2 speakers, 1 and 2, but again, if we can please make it quick. Microphone 2, please. Sorry, microphone 1. I pointed to 1, I said 2. Microphone 1. Microphone 1.
Hello. Hi, my name is Raven Hall. I'm one of the elected band councillors from Kitasoo Haycase Nation. I just want to say I appreciate you showing up here today. I also want to say just very quickly and very briefly that, you know, Indigenous people, we are not a campaign trail. So everything that you are speaking out in any platform that you go to, reconciliation is action. So I look forward to, you know, to see you in government. That is what I am hoping for. And number one is that, you know, I am an Indigenous advocate for missing and murdered Indigenous people. And we've been waiting on that red dress alert for a long time. I get messages every day, so much so just last night, I'm from BC, and telling me that 2 young girls are missing. Those red dress alerts could have saved thousands of people just this year. So I just want to make that loud and clear that reconciliation means action. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be able to take one final speaker at microphone 2. Go ahead.
Sego so Guego, a Hondo eager day, the desires, Cody Gunner, the Dio Daibo, Mahawk Council of Ganawage. Still waiting to hear back from you. I sent you an invitation back in July. I haven't got a response back. But if we're talking true nation to nation, from Ganawage's stance is just get it Ganawage's way and let us do what we have to do. But you have many individual nations that are here. You need to meet with us directly and not just at of organizational level. So again, I invite you to Ganawage as well as to the Iroquois Caucus, and we represent ourselves at the end of the day. So yeah, well, and I'll give the rest of my time to my colleague.
Good day, Jagmeet. Nice to see you. I have numerous questions, but I'll just keep it short and sweet. Do you support First Nations people to pay carbon tax? I'll just leave it like that, and hopefully we can have conversation in the future. I did invite you to my territory, but we got snubbed. Masi, Cold Lake First Nations Chief.
Migach. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jagmeet Singh for final responses and closing comments.
Sure. Thank you very much for the questions. First was the Band Council about the red dress alert and how it could have saved lives in BC. I agree. I want to see this get expanded as quick as possible. I think the Highway of Tears in BC would be a very logical next step to get the pilot project expanded. And so we're pushing for that. I hear you. This could have saved lives. I want to save lives. I'm going to push to make sure this happens. Ganawage, I was in the nation. I had a couple of visits there in the past, but I'm definitely due to visit again. I will definitely make sure we respond to the invitation. Sorry for the lack of response. I agree. I'm trying to get out to as many nations as I can, and being on the ground is the best way to speak with and connect with the community. And then another chief, again, raised the same invitation, so I will make sure we try to follow up. And we're going to put forward a different plan on the climate. And I would say that when it comes to the climate, we got to be real clear about the different plans. The Conservative plan is to say that if you're a big polluter, no cost, pollute as much as you want. That's their plan, right? They're saying no price on pollution. So no price on pollution means if a big company pollutes into the water, pollutes into the land, pollutes into the air, poisons the land, poisons the water, poisons the air, he's saying that there should be no cost for that. They should do as much as they want, free. I think that's wrong. I think there should be a cost. If a big company wants to try to pollute the land, I want to stop them from doing that. I want to make it so expensive that it's not worth it for them to pollute the land and the water and the air. So I think that's why I would disagree with Pierre Poilievre, who thinks there should be no cost to polluting. But with Justin Trudeau, I think the plan that he's put forward puts too much burden on working people, puts a burden on families, puts a burden on people, and lets the big polluters off the hook. And I think that's a problem. So we're going to have our own plan, which will be different, which will not let the polluters off the hook, and which will support the working people. Will support the working class, who we are. So those are the different approaches, and eventually people will choose what they think is best. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nepenak to present a gift.
Well, thank you. Just on behalf of all First Nations and First Nations chiefs in attendance and the attendees here, we want to thank you for giving us your time today. And here's a small gift and token from all of us. Chimigwich.
Chimigwich.
And I'll now introduce my colleague Cedric to get us into the next presentation.